The one question that I get asked the very most by students probably is, build me a study plan. How exactly should I study for the ACT? How much should I study? When should I study? How should I study? In general, students want a study plan. They want a set schedule. They want to know what to do and when to do it in order to improve as fast as possible. And that's understandable from my perspective because I've been a student and I wanted to improve my score as fast as possible. So finding the ideal plan is very, very important. The problem is when students ask, how should I make a study plan? What's the best study plan? That's different for every student because every student has a different situation. They have different scores, target scores, current scores, different levels of classes that they've taken. They have different practice exam numbers that they've taken. So every student situation is different and there isn't just one answer for what the right study plan is. One study plan for one student might work terribly for another. So we need to find a solution. What is the solution? In this video, I'm going to provide a form of a solution, which is I'm going to try to provide some answers to those questions like, okay, if you have this much time left, or if you've practiced this much, or if you have XYZ scenario, how can you find a study plan? What can you do? What's your action plan to get to the point that you need to get? And that's different for every situation. That's different for whatever factors you're working with. So there's a few different things that we'll play around with. First is how much time you have. We'll also play around with how much you've practiced, and we'll also look at the score that you're going for. I'm going to give you some answers depending on what your specific situation is for these three things. You'll get an idea of what you need to be doing in order to improve as much as you want. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty details of these study plans and how they work, let me just mention a couple things. Firstly, if you want to skip to a certain part of the video, check out the timestamps that are down below. Additionally, if you are interested in using any of the resources, the free resources, paid resources that I mentioned in this video, including 6 free official practice exams, those are all linked below. Now that being said, let's get into actually building some study plans and talking about how to use your situation to your advantage, okay? So the first thing that I want to talk about is time. How much time do you have left? If you're in a situation where you have 16 weeks before your ACT exam, you're very different than someone who has 6 weeks or 4 weeks. So how do we work around this? I'm going to give you 3 different time scenarios. One is where you have 4 weeks, one is where you have 8 weeks, and one is where you have 12 weeks. The ideal scenario is where you have 12 or more weeks. If you have 12 or more weeks, what you can do is just take 1 practice exam per week. If you do this, you'll get to 8 to 12 practice exams within a couple months, and you'll be at a good practice volume. After taking that many practice exams, you will have been used to the skills tested on the exam, you will have been able to practice a lot of different strategies, and you'll just be pretty good at the ACT exam in general. With this method, I would also encourage reviewing all of your past mistakes on English and math after every 4 weeks. So you take 4 weeks worth of exams, and then you review all the problems that you got wrong in that 4-week period so you can re-review the stuff that you're missing out on. The questions you get wrong on English and math are evidence of your mistakes. You need to make sure you're learning from them, and that's exactly what the point of that particular exercise is. Now that's a 12-week plan, and unfortunately most students don't fit into that category where they have 3 months before their test date where they start prepping. A lot of students cram. So let's shorten the time a bit. What if you have 8 weeks left? You're gonna do the same thing, except you're gonna bump up your practice a bit more, and you're gonna review a bit more frequently. So instead of doing 1 practice test per week, I'd say do 1.5. Okay, so take it up a little bit. And think of it, that averages out to about 1 section per day, which isn't terrible if you want to split it up like that. Additionally, instead of just reviewing your past mistakes every 4 weeks, I would say bringing that down to 2. So every 2 weeks, you're reviewing all the mistakes that you made over the last practice exams that you've done, and that'll help you, again, review the skills that you're making mistakes on. It'll help you learn the content that you're struggling with. Now, what about if you have even less time? Because even 8 weeks is a long time, that's 2 months. What if you have 4 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week? In that scenario, you need to practice as much as possible. Typically, that would mean 2 practice exams per week or more. I know some students that'll do like 5 or 6, like literally do a practice exam a day. I would not recommend that because that's gonna make you very tired and you're gonna hate yourself. So 2 a week is fine. If you have just a week left, then maybe bumping it up a little bit more would be a good idea. But the point is 2 a week is a healthy number. And after every 2 practice exams, every 1 week, I would say, review all your past mistakes. So you need to review these as much as possible so you learn those skills as fast as possible. Now that's kind of how it works out when we're playing around with the amount of time that you have left. But let's say we're playing around with the amount of the points that you're trying to get. Let's say that you're trying to improve from a 20 to a 30. How does that differ in terms of study plan from someone that's trying to improve from a 25 to a 30, or from a 31 to a 34, or from a 13 to a 21, right? These are different score combinations, and each score range will require a different amount of work. Here's what I'll say to answer that. If you're trying to get to 27 or below, then everything that I just mentioned will probably work very well for you. The different time, balances and how you structure your time. If you're trying to improve above a 28 or above, that's where you're basically gonna have to practice as much as possible, because getting those last few points on the exam those are the hardest points to get. If you ever look at, for example, a reading score table, like even if you get just 1 or 2 questions wrong, your score might go down by like 3-4 points. So that's why practice at that point is extremely important. Not just choosing a method that you like and that works for you, but perfecting it, like getting so good at it that you literally don't miss any questions, or that you miss maybe just 2 or 3 questions on every section. Okay, you need to get to that point. And if that's the case for you, if you're trying to go above a 28, then I'd say just try to do 2 practice exams per week. Now, depending on the amount of time, like if you have a lot of time left, right, you probably won't have to do that. I recommend 8 to 12 practice exams is probably a good cap, right? So if you have 12 weeks left and you're trying to get a 33, for example, you don't need to take like 24 practice exams. Probably 12 is enough. But if you're in a scenario where you're on a time crunch a little bit, then doing 2 practice exams per week in this particular scenario where you're trying to get above a 30 or above a 28 is going to be a good idea, because you're going to need that volume to literally perfect your method to an extent. The last thing we'll discuss is how to customize your study plan based on, the amount of practice you've done. Because if you've done 3 practice exams, you're in a very different position than someone that's done 12. Okay, so what do you do in these scenarios? My general recommendation is try to get to 8 to 12 full practice exams by the time your test date is here. The reason I say 8 to 12 is because that's a good number in terms of getting you exposed to the exam, getting you exposed to different skills, the different problem types for each skill, allowing you enough practice opportunity to actually try the different strategies that we teach in our videos, and getting some experience with experimenting with them and seeing what works and what doesn't. If you don't get 8 to 12 full exams under your belt before test day, then there's a risk that you're gonna see new content on the exam on your test day. Literally, like there's gonna be stuff that like, oh, I didn't expect this, or this felt a little bit too fast. So getting that test anxiety out, getting those unexpected things out of the way is going to be done by just practicing more and more. So my recommendation, if you're less than 8, try to get to 8. If you're like 7 or 8, so my recommendation is if you're less than 8, right, try to get in that range, 8 to 12, but don't go beyond like 3 or 4 practice exams per week to get there. Like, because if you have like, 3 practice exams that you've done and you want to get to 8, but you only have a week left, then that's not really going to work out. You might be able to do 3 in a week, but 5 in a week, that's kind of tough. So I'm not going to force you to do that, but again, try to get to 8 at the very least and do maybe 2, 3, 4 practice exams per week maximum to get there. Now, what if you're already in the 8 to 12 practice exam ranges? Like you've done 8 to 12 sections of English, 8 to 12 for math, 8 to 12 reading, science, right? In that scenario, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing full practice exams anymore. Probably just doing sections here and there. So if you feel like your English is really, really weak compared to your other sections, then just focus on English a little bit more, because you don't need to take full exams anymore. You probably need to do focused practice. And additionally, if you want to still do full exams, if you want to increase your entire score and you already have 10, 12 practice exams under your belt, then I would just say do a moderate schedule of 1 to 1.5 per week. Wouldn't go beyond 2, because you don't really need that much practice is only going to benefit you so much at this point, considering you've already done so much practice. At that point, if you're already at 8 to 12, or if you're beyond 8 to 12, what you want to do more of is reviewing your past mistakes, reviewing the mistakes that you made on your past practice exams, seeing what you messed up on, and how you can actually learn from those problems that you got wrong, especially on English and math. So that's it for this video. I know I talked a lot about different practice methods, timing of your schedule and whatnot, but hopefully you can take all this and throw it into a schedule that works for you. I know there's a lot of things going on, but that's just the nature of building schedules. There's a lot of factors you have to consider. When I do this for students, when I tutor them, I typically end up, considering 7 or 8 different factors. Here, I just gave you 3, so there's some things you want to take into account that even I didn't talk about in this video. But again, hopefully this was helpful at the end of the day. If you need any more resources, if you need tutoring, problems, videos, more videos than just what we have on YouTube that teach skills and go way more in depth than anything that I do on YouTube, then check out our courses. We have literally courses that start at $9 a month and that go up to, full-on tutoring programs with me. So if you're interested in that, check out our links below. We have free and paid resources. That's it for me. Best of luck, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.